Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with the second video of the day. I'm being far too prolific lately. You know, they say one of the laws of power is that you need to make yourself scarce, that you shouldn't just put it all out there, that less is more, but lately there's just too much crap going on in the world for me to comment on, so here we go again. Now, if you missed my first video where I outlined how the Canadian government is planning on amending what's called Bill C-21, which is a bill that is basically being used to trample Canadian firearms owners' rights. And the recent amendment is no exception to that. The Canadian government is planning on taking all, or at least 90 to 99% of our semi-automatic weapons. Yes, if you didn't know, my fellow American friends, we actually do still possess a lot of firearms, but after this bill is inevitably put through, it is not going to be the case. We're going to be left with muzzle loaders, maybe a few shotties, a few single-shot rifles, maybe lever action, bolt action, that kind of thing, but no more semi-auto. So this is why you need to go check out the CCFR YouTube channel hosted by Rod Giltaka, a person who is far more knowledgeable than me about these matters, so he can explain to you the insidious nature of all of these gun bans. There's a lot of people who come in the comment section and they're like, well, you know, they didn't quite say that the SKS was included, and why do you have to be so pessimistic? Look, it's called inductive reasoning. It's what all the powerful people in the world have used to get ahead of the curve. And sometimes you just got to think for yourself. It's pretty clear what the trajectory is with the erosion of our rights and freedoms as it pertains to firearms. It's going the way of the dinosaur. And if you cannot see how they're going to finesse the SKS into this legislation, then my friend, you are lacking in something important, because I can tell you that the SKS, they're saying the reason why it won't be included is because it doesn't have a detachable magazine, but you can modify the SKS in 15 minutes to accept mags. It's not hard. In fact, I've done it to mine. It sucked, so I went back to good old tried and true World War I stripper clips, because that's just what works best. Is it a World War I gun or World War II? I'm going to go on a limb and say it's World War I, but who knows? Anyways, all you need to know is that dystopia is coming, and that's really what we have a choice between right now. All-out dystopia, cyberpunk style, you know, we're all forced into the cities eating our FDA-approved stem cell meat sludge, or Mad Max, post-apocalyptic nuclear war wasteland thing. And even Emmanuel Macron came out at a recent conference and he said, you know, what the world needs is a one-world order. One world governance, or we're going to descend into a bipolar world between the Chinese, Russians, and all the other Asian countries, and, well, of course, it's going to be the BRICS nations versus NATO, and that's going to ultimately result in World War III. So you can take your pick, cyberpunk or Mad Max. Maybe cast your vote in the comments section below. What would you prefer, a Mad Max world where, you know, it was just post-apocalyptic, everything was just an irradiated wasteland, it was every man fighting for himself, or under the dystopian thumb of our AI-infused robot overlords who genetically modified themselves so that we'll never be able to catch up to them? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Okay, now let's just talk about what is going on in the world. A lot of people are sleeping on what is going on in Ukraine right now, and I'm going to try to spell it out for you because there's something insidious going on there too. It's incremental. People are so fickle. You know, I mean, unless it's right spelled out for a lot of people, they're never going to make the inferences they need to understand what is coming. And that is how you get ahead in this world, is by being ahead of the curve. You got to be a little crazy. No normal person you can't be normal and ahead of the curve. Put it that way. You can put that on a t-shirt. The Patriot missile systems in Poland from Germany are another step towards World War III, because this is what's going to happen. You need to think about what's happening right now. All of the nuclear power plants in Ukraine have been shut down today. All. This is due to power cuts caused by Russian airstrikes. And even the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant has been shut down because Ukraine has stopped power flowing to it. So Ukraine controls the power that flows into Europe's biggest nuclear power plant. Now, what this means is that the spent fuel rods can't be kept cool unless through a diesel power system. Now, when you're talking about a war zone, and if it descends into all-out war, there is a great likelihood that at least one of these nuclear reactors is going to have some radiological incident. But that's not the biggest point of concern. The biggest point of concern is that this is going to create a mass exodus of refugees because all of Kiev is in the dark. They have zero running water, according to the last reports that I've just watched. The mayor, Klitschko, has prepared 1,000 shelters that are outfitted with wood stove generators and gasoline and diesel generators, but they're not going to be able to continue to. There's a reason why we don't run our society on diesel and gasoline generators, is because there's just not enough of it to go around, especially with the price of diesel nowadays. And even woodlands, that requires a lot of forestry activity, which I'm not sure they're able to easily do right now, especially in a war-like environment. And I doubt that they prepared enough firewood, because you can't just throw any old firewood into a wood stove. It's got to be seasoned a little bit. So anyways, there's going to be mass evacuations, okay? They're saying 3 million right now, but it's likely going to be a lot worse. What that is going to cause is this conglomeration of people in the West Ukraine. And with these Patriot missile defense systems that are on the border now between Poland and Ukraine, they can reach into Ukraine's airspace a significant distance. Now, if you are a Russian fighter jet or a bomber and you're going on a bombing campaign, and say, for some reason, I doubt that the Germans are going to initiate an attack necessarily, but they might just, make themselves targets, okay? If things start to get pretty crazy in terms of the Russians targeting the supply lines coming through in that direction, because it's all coming through in the West. So this is just another step towards war. We've seen how close we came just the other day to Article 4 being invoked. And like I say, I don't even think anymore. I think they've realized, maybe the Article 4 thing, maybe that's not even necessary. So we'll probably not even see Article 4 evoked formally anymore. It's just going to be some secret, clandestine back channel meeting that occurs between all of the NATO member states when the time comes. Because when you use these buzzwords, you immediately put people on a higher DEFCON level. And that probably is not going to end well for any of us. So Russia could potentially target these Patriot missile systems if they start intercepting Russian missiles or, heaven forbid, Russian planes. And I say heaven forbid only because that would be an immediate escalation to a major conflict. If the Russians take out these Patriot missiles, then conversations are going to be had. You already have the UK planning on sending helicopters. Germany will be sending tanks. There's going to be a lot more heavy equipment sent there. And once the evacuation has happened, once general winter sets in and the Russians unleash their newly trained troops, there are hundreds of thousands of troops and all the new equipment that they are bringing forth. They're putting forth these new tanks. What are they called? Apparently, it's the most advanced tank in the world. It's a very new tank. It's called the T-14 Armada. Has the best armor, best weapon systems. It's fast. It has one of the best defensive systems. Has unmanned turrets, and whoever is controlling it is completely safe from attack. So they're bringing in the big guns now. They're going to be bringing in the big guns this winter. Now, on the flip side, you still have Ukraine saying that they're going to be able to take Crimea before the year is over. And as I've said before they take Crimea, it's going to go nuclear. At least that's what I would suspect. I cannot see a world in which Crimea and Russia lets Crimea go without letting loose at least one tactical nuclear weapon. And you'll notice that when the Russians talk to the media, if they're foreign ministers, their ambassadors, envoys, whatever they are, they always seem to want to say that, don't worry, we're never going to use nukes. And it's like, why would you feel the need to say that if you weren't actually thinking about it. So some people will say that the Russians are going to steamroll this winter because they have the advantage historically. Russians typically do very well in winter wars. Other people are saying, no, the Ukrainians are going to continue to push. The ambassador to the UK, the Russian ambassador, said that there is a moment of calm right now, and it's allowing the troops to regroup, and that it's likely going to be calm for the next few weeks. So don't be surprised if we don't see any major maneuvers in the next few weeks, that we just see these bombardments increasing. But we're seeing it, guys. I mean, there's some people who just want it spelled out. They just think it's going to happen tomorrow. And look, I learned my lesson with respect to the temporal nature of these events. I learned my lesson during 2020 in COVID. I once thought that, the pandemic thing would circle the planet in like a month. I mean, that's what we're all conditioned to think in the movies. Praxis Prepper made a great point about this. He said, it makes for a far more entertaining film if you can condense the SHTF into shorter and shorter time intervals. If you spread it out over 3 years, it's kind of boring, and who wants to sit through a movie that's 3 years long? So that's what we have to understand with this conflict, is that it's a slow creep, okay? And even the Czech Republic has said today that they need to prepare for a large-scale war with Russia. They say that NATO and Russia have never been closer to war than now, and this is not the first high-ranking NATO member who has suggested that they need to prepare their militaries for war with Russia. You also have Olaf Scholz in the last 24 hours saying that we must be ready for an escalation, that we must be ready for attacks on infrastructure. This is why the Germans are building up their defense spending. Now, what do they mean by infrastructure? Do they mean some sort of interconnect between Ukraine and the rest of Europe, whether that's Ukraine sending energy to Europe or Europe sending energy to Ukraine, or supplies, or vice versa? So we know that the situation is bound to escalate because Russia has officially been declared by the EU Parliament a state sponsor of terrorism. Okay, and Russia's response to this was kind of comedic. What did they say again? Yeah, they said that we're gonna designate the European Parliament a state sponsor of idiocy. So colorful language. I'm guessing Dmitry Medvedev wrote that script. It was a landslide vote that was supported by all of the members, and this adds to the fact that Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and the Czech Republic have already officially declared Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. And once you do that, you don't go back. That's not something that happens before peace talks are in process. That's something that happens when you're at an inflection point in the escalatory curve. Because what it necessitates is regime change, because you're talking about tribunals, war crimes, and what they're saying is we're not going to stop until Putin is out of power. Like I've said before, people are thinking that this is going to be a good thing, but what's likely going to happen is you're going to get someone far crazier in there who is going to be even more hawkish on the war, and the war is just going to escalate much faster. Now, the Russian hacker group Killnet has responded to this designation of state sponsor of terrorism by hacking the EU Parliament's website. I think it was just, I'm not sure if it was denial of service attack or what it is, but they have said that it was the most sophisticated attack that the Parliament has endured so far. So they're flexing their cyber capabilities. And I cannot emphasize enough the concern about this nuclear situation. All of the nuclear power plants in Ukraine, I think there's something like 20 reactors across 4 or 5 nuclear power plants. But all of them, just check my mic here, have been temporarily shut down due to power being cut off. So the situation is getting dire. The last numbers that came out was 50% of the country is without power. I'm sure after the airstrikes today, it's a lot more than that. But they're still telling people not to panic, okay? They don't want people to leave. They say, don't worry, the situation is under control. I think in this day and age, it's safe to say that if the government is telling you that, everything is under control and not to worry about it, that you should do the complete opposite, or that you should at least prepare. Don't never worry about stuff. Just get prepared. We're all about being prepared, not scared. So, and just recall, this is the same government that didn't want people to leave because they wanted to draft them into the military. And this is why they said that there was very little chance that the Russians were ever going to invade. And don't worry, you shouldn't leave. We made a video on the normalcy bias at the time. And sure enough, at that same time, people called us fearmongers. That, oh yeah, the Russians are never going to invade. This is all just theatrics. And sure enough, they went silent, but they come back. They come back all the time. They're going to be on this video saying this and this and this is going to happen. And then when 3 months comes and it all happens, they're going to, they're going to have moved the goalpost even more before they're sitting there with only their slingshot in hand, because that's all they're legally allowed to carry. So don't listen to those people. Take a little risk and just project, things forward a little bit. And I'm pretty sure we'll be on the same page. Now, what else do we got to talk about? Senators are pushing Joe Biden to give these attack drones, MQ-1C Eagle attack drones, to Ukraine, which of course would be a major escalation. I also want to talk about this Russian phone prank situation, because apparently the Polish president was called by some Polish pranksters, and he thought he was talking to Emmanuel Macron, who is the French president. But something about this call just wasn't right with me. He was being far too explicit in his statements that I don't want war with Russia. I don't want war with Russia. And to me, that's exactly what you'd expect, because all these guys, after what happened with Merkel and Obama, all these guys must know that their phones are tapped, or that somebody's listening in, or that the transcript is going to be released. Okay, so I don't put a whole lot of stock into that phone call. A lot of people are saying, yeah, the Russian pranksters tricked them into thinking that he was talking to Macron. Even if he was tricked, I don't think he's going to say anything that is reflective of the actual plan that they have hatched. So I don't put a whole lot of stock in the Polish president admitting that they don't want to go to war. And I'm not saying that they want to go to war per se. I think they're looking at it as we may have no choice. We may have no choice but to go to war, because there's going to be this massive influx of refugees. There's going to be all this traffic in Western Ukraine. You're going to have Patriot missiles on the border. They're going to keep sending more stuff. If the Russians start pushing, the Ukrainians are going to start getting pushed back, and that's when you're going to have, sooner or later, somebody is going to send something over the border, and it's not going to end well for anybody. You have Russia even reinforcing their own border with Ukraine in the Belgorod region, and this has led some people to believe, this is on their border now, this is far before like the Donbass and around the Kharkiv region, some people thinking that maybe the Russians are concerned that they're going to be pushed all the way back. I can't see it happening. There's talk about, the Russian economy starting to suffer quite a bit under the sanctions. And there is talk about potential political instability there, but it all just seems to echo the same kind of propaganda we've heard all along. So I'm not putting a lot of stock into it, but I'm not saying that it's entirely untrue. There may well be some truth to it. It appears as though, there's some truth to both sides. But historically, General Winter is on the Russian side. We know that the Ukrainian military has been, by and large, depleted, and that even though they have all of NATO investing in them, that the Russians still do have a advantage when it comes to the quantity and the quality of the weapons that they have. And it's important to remember at all times that this isn't a proxy war anymore. It was a proxy war when Russia was fueling the Donbass and NATO was fueling Ukraine. But this is a direct engagement between NATO, who is spearheaded by Ukraine, and the Russians. And that's why, like I said in that video yesterday, we are ostensibly already at war. It's just not called that, and wars will never be. Nobody will ever declare war ever again. I don't even think they've declared war for many decades now. They'll always give it some euphemistic term. So don't wait for the media to come on and say, yep, we declared war and now you should go and stock up on stuff. The fact is, you have American-made German Patriot missiles in Poland protecting Ukraine against the Russians. That's about as, World War III as it gets, or at least the first stage of World War III. There is, according to Sputnik, which is a Russian news source, and we try to, I go and I watch Ukrainska Pravda, I watch BBC, I watch Al Jazeera, but I also check out Sputnik, I check out Taz, I check out RT. I try to always cross-reference everything, and we try to bring you guys, a nice, moderate viewpoint of things. Anyways, according to them, these are 5 reasons why the oil cap will not work. The oil cap that is supposed to go into place on December 5th. They're saying that oil demand has actually outstripped supply, meaning that regardless of this oil cap, which is trying to lower oil prices, there simply isn't enough supply to go around anyways. And they're also saying that Russia can cut oil production, and Russia has said that they're not going to deal with any countries who try to enforce this price cap. So you know right there that they're going to cut oil production and create an artificial shortage, which will lead to a price increase. They also say that NATO no longer has the leverage to force OPEC to produce more. Some people think that Saudi Arabia can't even produce more if it wanted to anyways. You also have the fact that other world players in Asia are going to be buying Russian crude. And, I was looking at the population demographic statistics yesterday. I did not realize the population decline was as bad as it was in Europe. I mean, it is sinking like a stone, okay, in most of the developed world. Now, and it's sinking like a stone, particularly in the southern part of Europe. And I only have to wonder, is there something about this Chernobyl? Is there something about the nuclear testing? There's got to be something that's lowering the sperm counts. But not only that, I understand it's cultural. Women don't want to have kids, the feminism thing, and, two-parent, divorce, and you have dual working households. So people are just having less kids. I understand all the cultural reasons. But I also think that there's something going on, with just the fact that we're not able to have as many children anymore. Anyways, what was I talking about? I totally got off track there. Oh, yeah. So the people who are going to be buying Russian crude, the markets that are going to be growing are the developing world. Okay, that's not NATO. That's not the golden billion, as Putin calls them. Anyways, Russia has its own ships. This whole Russian oil cap scheme relies on their ships not being insured and sanctioning the countries that do business. But Russia has its own ships and it can provide its own insurance. Anyways, those are the reasons. Maybe you guys have some valid counterpoints to those. We also have this news that the Russian economy is faltering. Russia is going to be reducing its spending on healthcare, schools, and roads. This, of course, is going to create a disgruntled population. This is why all of those reports about, prisoners being tortured and stuff, like or POWs being killed by Ukrainians while they're giving up, although there's some footage which contradicts that. Regardless, all of those things are only going to embolden the average Russian even more and get them to support this, where you're almost going to need things like that to happen so that people's rage and support for the conflict doesn't wane when up against these losses in services that the government's no longer going to be providing, because 1/3 of the budget is going to be going to defense spending. 1/3! Okay, usually in good times, I think right now, European countries' obligations to NATO is like 2%. 1/3 of your GDP going to war. That's called a war economy. Did we do a video on this just a few months ago? I think we did. And I'm pretty sure Mr. Mimi was in the comment section telling us about how we're just being alarmists. But okay, we'll see you again. Russia resumes Arctic bomber flights over the Arctic. This had been stopped since the beginning of the conflict, and they started to do it again. And recall that it wasn't too long ago, just last month, I believe, that 2 Russian bombers were intercepted in and around the Alaska region by U.S. fighter jets and escorted out without incident. Canada is also spending billions, with a B, 4.6 billion to be exact, to upgrade our early warning system over the next couple years. If you didn't know, there's a string of radar systems up in the north that we rely on to tell us when we're going to get nuked. So at least we're going to know if we're going to get nuked. We'll have a little bit of time to get to safety. What else do we got going on here? We have Germany, who it's looking like they're going to revert to a 1970 level of industrialization, and that is due to the high price of gas. And recall that Germany is the biggest economy in Europe. So as goes Germany, so goes Europe, and so goes the Western world. We have China hoarding gold, allegedly, in a plan to ditch the US dollar. If you didn't know, China has been selling their US Treasury bonds at a rapid rate and buying gold, and central banks all over the world have been purchasing gold in record amounts, the highest since 1967. Gold purchases by regulators have quadrupled, and this is all sparked by the freezing of Russian assets in the hundreds of billions, and that's prompted a lot of suspicion about, well, what if we ever get in a tiff with the United States? Are they going to do the same thing to us? So we better start cashing in our chips while we can. So don't be surprised if the valuation of the US dollar starts sinking like a stone. We also have some stuff coming out of China. China is flaring up. We have violent protests at the iPhone factory. Funny, I don't hear Apple saying much about this right now. But the Foxconn factory that was on lockdown, hundreds of workers were shown clashing with security personnel who are in hazmat suits. This has been something that has been going on for quite a while, since the whole lockdown of Shanghai earlier in the year. You have people there who are forced to live in and around the Foxconn campus, they call it. It's like a mini city. And you also have massive COVID quarantine camps being built. So if you didn't know, China is seeing its largest COVID inspection spike since the beginning of the pandemic, at least that we know of. Of course, the numbers at the start of the whole thing were rather sketchy. I'm pretty sure they were far, far worse than they were letting on then. Regardless, they are sticking to the zero COVID policy, meaning that we're likely going to have more supply chain disruptions. Now, the question has to be asked, for starters, why aren't they giving their population the medicine? That's one of my biggest, questions that I have. And is this all a part of the war thing? Is this all a part of getting the population ready for the conflict that's coming in the South China Sea? Because I distinctly remember a video that I released, and there was a supercut, and there's a scene of a guy who's in one of these hazmat suits, and he's scolding. He's one of the 100 million CCP members, and he's scolding one of the people who's putting up a fuss about the restrictions, and he's telling them, don't you realize you have to do your part? We're going to war with America. We're going to war with America. You need to do your part. So something about this just doesn't sit well with me. Why are they still doing this? Now, on the bird flu front, I've been doing some research on bird flu, and we're going to be doing a whole video on that. There's some good news, but mostly bad news. The bad news is that bird flu is everywhere. I mean, birds are dying. It's just in record amounts. The good news is, surprisingly, there's been remarkably low human infections this time around. Now, is it because back in 2014 and 2015, when you had those record high human infections, where of course half the people who get bird flu die, and it's still the same strain of bird flu as far as I know? It might have, mutated a little bit, but maybe it's slightly more infectious. But when you're talking about coming down from a 50% infection rate, you got a long way to go. Even if we seen a 2% fatality rate pandemic, that would make COVID look like a walk in the park. Anyways, bird flu is just exploding everywhere. The problem is it didn't diminish in summertime as it typically does. And so now it's just exploding. You got geese dying in the UK. Record numbers of states have it. It's here in Canada. It's everywhere. And isn't it funny how right around the time that this happens, and I ain't saying it's a tinfoil hat conspiracy or anything like that, I just think these things are kind of funny, that the lab-grown meat has passed the first phase of regulatory approval, the lab-grown chicken using cell cultures. Yeah, FDA approved it, first step. So if you can pass the first step of something, usually there's a 90% chance that you're going to get fully approved. So, you know, we're all going to be eating the Petri dish chicken pretty soon, the lucky ones anyways. That's if we go dystopian. If we go Mad Max, then I don't know if we're going to be growing any chickens at all. At least you'll be able to, you know, be out there in the freehold where the robotic mercenaries dare not go for risk of, you know, being overrun by the barbarian hordes or whatever sort of myth they make to keep people in the cities. I don't know, guys. What do you think about all this madness? Let me know in the comments section below. And I've decided maybe at the end of every video, we'll talk about something on the wall. What should we talk about today? I just decided this right now, so I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. Let's talk about this. Cold steel Spetsnaz shovel. This is a very cost-effective shovel. You can use it, you can throw it like an axe, and this is very sharp. So this will stick in a tree. You can use it as a shield. There's a video with a guy showing all the different uses of it. You can use it as a hatchet. It's got some good weight to it. Obviously, you can dig with it. What else can you use it for? I guess you could use it as a weapon as well if you needed to. But it's pretty cost-effective. The cold steel, cheapo mystery steel, but still works good. And the great thing about this is the handle is detachable. I've had this one for a long time. I wrapped it in electrical tape because it gives you a better grip. Really nice grip with electrical tape. And you can take this stick off and you can get a longer shaft. That's what she said. And, you know, it'd be easier to work with. So you don't have to like bend all the way over and start digging in the ground like that and throw your back out and all that stuff. But yeah, it's a good little tool. I think these go for anywhere between 30 and 45 bucks. So go and pick one up. That's what we're going to do every day now. At the end of the video, we're going to talk about something on the wall. If you have any questions about gear, I'm going to give you guys a pro tip right now. We're going to be releasing a video tomorrow. If you've hung around this long, then you deserve to know that we are having a Black Friday sale. It starts now and it's 13% off the entire store. Now that might not sound like a lot to you because what a lot of stores do is they mark their prices up or they just give you a discount on one item. We don't do any of that stuff. For starters, it's just too hard. You know, we got thousands of SKUs at the store, so it's impossible for us to just, you know, raise all the prices of each one and then, you know, just for one day or whatever. So anyways, 13% off, store-wide, stock up on food, stock up on whatever sort of prepping stuff you need. It's the only time of the year I'm going to do it. I don't like doing it because we don't really make any money in doing it, but we have to make money to keep the lights on and pay all the communists who work here. So you know how it is, guys. Go check it out. Use coupon code Black Friday, all caps, for 13% off until midnight on Friday. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Canadian Prepper out.